I never planned on staying long that evening. It was supposed to be a quick stop, just dropping by to return a book I had borrowed from my friend. Nothing more, nothing less. But when the front door opened, it wasn't him standing there. It was her, his mother. She leaned against the doorway, hair tied back in a loose knot that looked like it had been done in a hurry. Strands had escaped and brushed against her cheek, softening the tiredness in her eyes. She looked at me for just a moment too long before pulling the door wider, as if she had only just remembered she had company waiting. "Come in," she said, her voice low, steady. I stepped inside, pretending not to notice how quiet the house was. My friend wasn't home, that much was obvious. The usual noise, the clatter of video games or music from his room, was missing. Instead, the living room carried only the hum of a ceiling fan and the faint smell of coffee that had been left sitting too long. She gestured toward the couch. "You can wait if you want. He shouldn't be long." I nodded, setting the book on the table. My plan had been to leave it and go, but something about the stillness of the house made it harder to walk back out. Maybe it was the way she sat across from me, not in a rush, not filling the silence. She picked up a mug, brought it to her lips, and winced when she realized it had already gone cold. "Do you want me to make more?" I asked before I could stop myself. Her lips curved, not quite a smile, but close. "I should be offering you that, not the other way around." The small exchange carried more weight than it should have. I could feel it in the pause that followed, in the way she glanced at me as if measuring how much to say. She had always been kind in passing, always polite, but this was different. The space between us wasn't filled with the casual safety of family friends anymore. It was charged with something I couldn't name. I noticed the way she wrapped both hands around the mug, though it wasn't warm. The way her eyes drifted past me, unfocused, like she was carrying a thought she didn't want to share. I wanted to ask her what it was, but instead I sat there, pretending to study the books stacked on the shelf. "You're quieter than him," she said suddenly. I looked up. "Is that a bad thing?" Her gaze lingered on mine longer than it should have. "No," she whispered. Then she looked away. My chest tightened. There was nothing in those two letters, not really, but somehow it carried the weight of something unsaid. I shifted, restless. My knee bounced once, and I forced it still. The silence stretched again, and I wondered if she could hear the quickness of my breathing. Then she stood, moving to the kitchen, and her absence felt sharper than her presence had been. I followed the sound of cupboards opening, glass clinking. When she came back, she handed me a fresh cup of coffee. Her fingers brushed against mine, maybe by accident, maybe not. The touch was brief, but it lingered in a way that left my skin burning long after. "Thanks," I muttered, my voice betraying me, quieter than I meant it to be. She sat back down, folding her hands in her lap this time, not touching her own cup. Her eyes flicked toward me again, as though she was about to say something. But then, suddenly, the sharp sound of the doorbell cut through the moment. We both froze. Her lips parted slightly, and her eyes stayed locked on mine as if neither of us wanted to look away. The bell rang again, and in that fragile pause, I realized I didn't want to leave. She stood, smoothing her hands down her sides as though she needed the gesture to steady herself. I stayed seated, my pulse thudding too loudly in my ears. For a second, I thought she might tell me to answer it, but instead, she turned toward the door herself. It was just a delivery, a brown box, left on the step. She signed, thanked the man softly, then closed the door with a kind of heaviness that didn't match the trivial errand. When she returned, she didn't sit across from me this time. She set the box on the table, then sat closer, not beside me exactly, but closer than before. The air felt changed. "My husband used to handle these things," she said, almost to herself. Then, realizing the words had slipped, she pressed her lips together. I looked at her. "Used to." Her eyes flicked up to mine, quick, then away. "We've been separated for a while." She reached for her cup again, though it was still untouched. "It's better that way. For everyone." There was a finality to her tone, but also a crack running through it, like a door not fully shut. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't. My silence seemed to let her keep going. "You know," she said, her voice low, "when you're young, you think love will carry everything. Then one day you realize love isn't enough. Timing, choices, mistakes, they weigh heavier." Her words sat between us. I tried not to stare, but I couldn't help noticing the way her fingers traced the rim of the mug, circling over and over, restless. I wanted to tell her I understood, that I knew about mistakes, about timing. But what did I really know compared to her? I was only 20, barely starting. And she carried a history I couldn't touch. Still, there was something I couldn't stop thinking. She didn't look at me like I was just a boy. I don't mean to pry, I said finally, my voice softer than I intended. But you seem lonely. Her head tilted slightly, and for a moment I regretted it. Too blunt, too forward. But then she smiled, small and tired. Honesty is rare. Don't lose that. I felt my face warm. I wanted to say something back, but the words tangled, and the silence stretched again. The ceiling fan hummed above us. Outside, a car passed, its headlights flashing briefly across the living room walls. It felt like the whole world was reminding us this wasn't where I belonged, that this was risky, wrong, impossible. And yet, when she leaned forward to slide the box aside, her hand brushed mine again. This time, she didn't pull back. Just the faintest graze of skin, but deliberate enough that I knew it wasn't an accident. I held my breath, waiting for her to move, to excuse it, to pretend it never happened. She didn't. Her hand lingered, resting just long enough that my own fingers curled slightly, not holding, not quite, but aching to. Neither of us spoke. The silence said everything. The next day, I found myself back at her house, though I had no real excuse. My friend was gone for the weekend, and the book was already returned. I told myself it was about the coffee, about seeing if she was okay. When she opened the door, I froze for a fraction of a second. She was wearing a cardigan I had seen before, soft cream, and it hung loose over her shoulders. Her hair fell down now, not tied back, and it caught the light in a way that made my chest ache for reasons I couldn't name. "Back so soon?" she asked, voice teasing. But there was an undercurrent there, a tension I couldn't place. I wanted to check on the book," I mumbled, realizing how weak it sounded. She smiled faintly. "The book's fine." I swallowed, unsure whether to follow her inside or turn away. Somehow, I didn't either. I stepped across the threshold and stood there, unsure why. The house was quieter than yesterday, or maybe I was just noticing. The way the sunlight fell across the living room floor, the faint smell of laundry detergent mixing with coffee, the soft ticking of a wall clock, all of it felt too intimate, too exposed. We sat on the couch, across from each other again. She handed me the coffee first this time. My fingers brushed hers, not fleeting, not accidental. "I think I was rude yesterday," I said. "About your separation." Her eyes flicked up, then down again. "Rude? You didn't have to talk about it," I said. "I shouldn't have," she cut me off with a laugh, soft, almost sad. "No, it's fine. You're honest, remember?" I wanted to lean closer, wanted to say something reckless. I wanted to tell her that my chest tightened whenever she smiled, that her scent lingered in my clothes, that I thought about her constantly. But I couldn't. I just sat there, feeling the pull between what was right and what I wanted. Then my phone buzzed, a text from my roommate. "Dude, why is your mom's friend hanging around your house?" I froze. The words weren't mine, but they hit like a punch. I looked at her. She hadn't noticed. Her gaze was steady, patient, calm even. That calm made it worse. I swallowed. "It's nothing," I muttered, tossing the phone aside. She didn't press. She never did. But I could feel her watching me, the tiniest crease forming between her brows. We spoke in stilted sentences after that, small talk about the weather, the latest news, nothing about what simmered under the surface. And yet, every time our hands moved close, every time our eyes lingered, the air became heavier. Every pause carried a tension that both terrified and thrilled me. Then it happened. A sudden knock at the door. Sharp. Insistent. My friend. He had come back early. Her eyes widened, a flash of panic, and she stood quickly, reaching for the box I hadn't noticed on the table yesterday. I rose too, moving toward the kitchen, heart hammering, aware of how exposed we were. "Hey, anyone home?" my friend's voice called. I exhaled a shaky breath. She didn't speak, only glanced at me. And in that look, I saw the unspoken question. "What are we doing?" I stepped closer to her, close enough that the warmth from her body brushed against mine. The air between us thickened, and I could feel my pulse in my throat. She froze. Then, with deliberate control, she moved slightly aside, not away entirely, but enough to keep the physical closeness from crossing a line. "He's just back from errands," she whispered. My chest ached, the words catching in my throat. I wanted to say something, anything, but couldn't. Instead, I stood there, aware of every heartbeat, every shallow breath. The knock came again, louder this time. My friend's impatience pressing in. She took a step back, smoothing her cardigan over her shoulders, but didn't leave. I didn't leave either. The room seemed smaller, the tension sharper. And then, almost in unison, we reached for the same mug. Our fingers brushed, not a graze this time, but a contact that lingered, charged and impossible to ignore. I could feel her trembling slightly, and it mirrored my own. The room was silent except for the clock ticking, the ceiling fan humming, the muffled voice of my friend calling for us. Neither of us moved away. Neither of us spoke. The door opened just a crack, my friend's head peeking through, and for a second, everything threatened to unravel. She gave me a look, almost pleading. I understood instantly. Not words, not promises, just understanding. We held the moment, fingers barely touching, eyes locked, knowing we were on the edge of something that shouldn't exist and yet couldn't be denied. And in that heartbeat, I realized I didn't want to step back. Not really. The room felt impossibly small, impossibly intimate, and I could sense that this was just the beginning. I couldn't stop thinking about her all that afternoon. Every time my phone buzzed, every passing sound made me wonder if it was her calling. But when I finally returned to her house that evening, it wasn't just desire waiting for me. It was tension. She opened the door before I could knock. Her face had a flush I couldn't place, a mix of embarrassment, frustration, maybe anticipation. She held a mug in her hands, tighter than usual, knuckles white. Sit, she said, voice clipped. Not cold, but controlled. I did, though my chest thudded against my ribs like it was trying to escape. She poured herself coffee, didn't look at me, then sat across the table again. I wanted to speak, to break the distance between us, but she stopped me with a look, sharp, piercing, and impossible to ignore. I need to say something, she began, finally meeting my gaze. Her eyes were heavy, almost glistening. This, whatever this is, it can't happen. Not like this. You're my friend's age. I'm not. I shouldn't, her voice faltered. She bit her lower lip, trembling slightly, and I realized she wasn't angry or lecturing. She was afraid. Afraid of herself, of me, of what we were doing without even admitting it. I know. I whispered, my own voice betraying me, low and urgent. I know it's wrong. I shouldn't feel this, but I do. And I can't stop. Her hands shook, wrapping around the mug as if it were the only thing keeping her steady. You don't understand. There are expectations, rules. Your friend, people would never forgive me if they knew. I'm supposed to be responsible, careful, restrained. I leaned forward. And yet you're not. You're sitting here, looking at me like this, letting me. She cut me off with a sudden, sharp intake of breath, and I realized she hated that I was speaking aloud what we both already knew. A silence fell, thick and suffocating. Her eyes were fixed on mine, and I could see her pulse in her neck, the subtle tremble of her lips. I could feel my own trembling, the way my fingers itched to brush her hair from her face, to touch her cheek. Then it happened. She looked away suddenly, startled by something I didn't see. A knock at the door, soft this time, hesitant. My heart sank. My friend, my roommate. I didn't know, but the timing was merciless. Her hands dropped to her lap, trembling, and she whispered, almost to herself, I can't, not now. I wanted to protest, to say we could hide, that no one needed to know, but even as I opened my mouth, the words caught in my throat. I couldn't lie to her, and I couldn't lie to myself. Her gaze returned to me, filled with something raw, desire, fear, and an unspoken confession all rolled into one. It hit me harder than anything else. She wanted this as badly as I did. And that realization made everything harder. My hand twitched, reaching out, stopping just short of hers. Her eyes followed the motion, and she didn't pull away. Her lips parted slightly, just enough that I could imagine them saying something. A name, a plea, a confession. I swallowed. Every nerve in my body screamed for me to close the distance, to kiss her, to tell her everything I had kept silent. But the knock came again, louder, a stark reminder that the world existed outside this room. Her hand twitched, almost meeting mine, but then recoiled slightly. She took a breath, steadying herself, her chest rising and falling rapidly. I can't, she said again, voice barely audible. I wanted to argue, Wanted to tell her that right here, right now, nothing else mattered. But I stayed frozen, because in that moment I knew we were both on the edge. Both of us standing on the brink of something irreversible. And then the doorknob rattled. She looked at me one last time, eyes wide, a silent question in their depths. Will you stop me, or will you let me fall? My hand hovered over hers, trembling. Every instinct told me to move, to act, to close the final distance between us. But I didn't. Not yet. The room held its breath with us, waiting for the impossible choice, and everything. Desire, fear, risk, longing, hung in the air like static before the storm. The knock at the door wasn't my friend this time. She froze, chest tight, and her hand brushed mine again, but only for a fraction of a second before she pulled away, sharp. Her eyes flicked toward the hallway, calculating, and I realized immediately that this was not ordinary. The door opened, and standing there was my friend, the one whose book I had returned days ago, but not alone. Behind him, barely visible, was someone I didn't recognize at first, a neighbor, someone who had probably heard more than they should. "Hey, I thought I saw someone come in," my friend said casually, but his eyes darted to us, narrowing. The neighbor's gaze lingered longer, like a quiet observer taking mental notes. Everything shifted. The room that had felt intimate, suspended in time, now felt exposed. Vulnerable. Her lips parted, as if to explain, but no words came. She didn't reach for my hand. She didn't try to hide it. For a second, I thought maybe she wanted to, then realized she was frozen, the weight of guilt pressing her down. She started, but stopped herself, swallowing hard. I wanted to speak, to pull her aside, to whisper that it was okay, that no one would know, but the words stuck. The neighbor cleared their throat, too casual, too deliberate. "Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. My friend laughed nervously, masking his suspicion with a joke I didn't hear the punchline of. But his eyes flicked to her, sharp, and then to me, something unspoken hanging there. Her hand fisted at her side. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw the weight of the consequences in her eyes. Not just the fear of being caught, but the guilt she carried inside herself. Layered, complicated, impossible to untangle. I wanted to say, "It's not your fault. We didn't do anything wrong." But even I knew how fragile that line was. One glance, one misinterpreted gesture, and everything we had could shatter. The neighbor lingered, smiling faintly, almost teasing, almost accusatory. "Funny coincidence," they said lightly, but their eyes said something else entirely. Curiosity, judgment, intrigue. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. She pressed her fingers to her lips, as if holding back a confession. The room felt smaller with every second. I wanted to reach out, but every instinct told me to wait, to measure, to be careful. "I think we should talk," she finally said, voice low, trembling. I nodded, knowing she wasn't just talking about the neighbor. She was talking about us, about the impossible, dangerous, beautiful thing that had started between us. My heart raced, not from fear of her leaving, but from the thrill of how close we were, even as the world outside threatened to pull everything apart. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying and exhilarating at once. Nothing was safe anymore. Not the room, not her, not even my own courage. The truth had arrived, uninvited, sharp, unavoidable, and how we responded would change everything. The hallway felt impossibly long as she led me away from the open door, away from prying eyes. Every step echoed, every heartbeat hammered against my ribs like a warning I was ignoring. "I can't pretend anymore," she whispered, voice trembling. Her hand brushed mine, light, hesitant, but it sparked a fire I couldn't contain. I looked at her, really looked, and saw everything I'd been afraid to admit. Longing, guilt, desire, and a fear of consequences that hadn't existed before. I swallowed hard. "Neither can I," I said. We stopped in the kitchen, the air thick with unspoken truths. She leaned against the counter, shoulders slumped, eyes wide, and I realized she was letting herself fall into the moment, even knowing how dangerous it was. "I shouldn't," she said again, almost to herself. "I shouldn't want this you." I took a step closer, closing the distance I'd been aching toward since the first day I'd seen her. "Then don't think about it. Just feel it." Her breath hitched, and I could see her hands trembling at her sides. Every instinct screamed caution, yet every part of me burned for her. I reached out, gently brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. My fingers lingered, tracing the line of her jaw, hesitant, fearful. She leaned into the touch, and my chest tightened. For a moment, the world fell away. The neighbor, my friend, the risks, all of it, leaving only the two of us, suspended in a fragile bubble of longing. I never thought, she started, voice low, that someone like you could make me feel this way. Someone like me? I asked, half laughing, half choked with emotion. Yes, young, reckless, impatient, she said, and a small, sad smile curved her lips. And yet, I can't stop thinking about you. The words hit me harder than anything. I wanted to speak, to confess, to promise, to beg, but instead, I just stepped closer, and she didn't step back. Her hand found mine at last, intertwining fingers. It was simple, messy, human, the kind of touch that said more than words ever could. The tension between us shattered, replaced by something raw and real. I'm not afraid, I said softly. Her lips quivered. Neither am I. Not anymore. We lingered there, faces inches apart, breaths mingling. Every second felt like a lifetime. And just when I thought I could lean in, to close the final distance, the sound of a car pulling up outside made her flinch. Our hands stayed together, but the spell broke, leaving us suspended between choice and fear. We should, she began, but couldn't finish. I nodded, understanding. Not rejection, not denial, just recognition of the risk we were taking, the world outside our bubble, the chaos waiting for us if we crossed that line. And yet, the air still shimmered with what could happen, what had already started, what neither of us could erase. We didn't speak, but our eyes said everything. I didn't know what would happen next. Neither did she. But in that moment, messy, human, and impossible, we understood each other. Completely. Completely. And maybe that was enough. We didn't rush that night. The world outside waited, full of judgments, expectations, and unfinished conversations. But inside that quiet kitchen, time belonged only to us. She poured herself another cup of coffee, and I sat across from her, watching. The steam curled in the dim light, and I realized how much I had memorized her gestures, the tilt of her head, the way her fingers wrapped around a mug, the subtle way she avoided my gaze when she was nervous. I had been captivated from the first moment, and now, even after all the tension, all the almost moments, I couldn't look away. I never thought it would feel right, she whispered, voice soft, almost unsure. I leaned forward, resting my forearms on the table. It feels right, I said simply, even with all the risk, even knowing we have to be careful. Her lips curved into a faint, tired smile. Careful, she repeated. That's the hardest part. We laughed softly together, a sound that carried relief and longing. The world was still outside, threatening, but we had carved out a space for ourselves. Messy, imperfect, human. Then she reached across the table. Our fingers met again, not hiding, not tentative. This time, it wasn't hesitation that held us back. It was awareness, the delicate understanding that whatever came next needed to be ours, intentional, real. I don't want to pretend anymore, I said, voice low. I don't want to hide this. Her eyes softened. Neither do I, she said. But we'll have to be smart. Careful. Step by step. I nodded. Step by step. The phrase sounded simple, but it carried all the weight of everything we had endured. Every pause, every stolen glance, every brush of fingers that had set my skin on fire. We didn't need more words. The air between us said it all. Desire, respect, longing, and the tentative hope of a future that neither of us could fully predict. As I left her house that night, fingers still tingling from our brief touch, I realized something. The risk didn't make it wrong. It made it ours. Dangerous, yes. Complicated, yes. But ours. And for the first time, I felt like I could breathe. Fully, completely, knowing that whatever came next, we had already crossed the line of silence and into truth. Life outside would demand caution. People would ask questions, boundaries would need honoring. But we had learned the most important thing. We could feel, fully and unapologetically, without losing ourselves. Some stories end with certainty. Ours ended with understanding. A smile lingered on my lips, and I knew this wasn't the end. Not really. It was a beginning, fragile and human, messy and real. And maybe that was exactly what love was supposed to feel like. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next? See 11.